when you can go find and learn how to source off-market deals, that is the main thing I teach my students. You have the keys to the castle. You can leverage everything else because everybody else can get you a lender. They can get you money. They can get you an appraisal. They can get you whatever you want, but nobody's going to bring you a deal. Nobody.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 389. 3 years ago, my guest was an out-of-work actor who had just lost his wife's savings on a feature film that he produced. He was collecting unemployment and had a second child on the way. He had very little money in the bank, and the situation couldn't have been more difficult. So how did Cameron Barsanti go from that down-on-his-luck actor to building a $35 million portfolio of self-storage facilities? Today, Cameron is going to tell us how he created a system to acquire 10 self-storage facilities across 4 states by cold calling mom and pop owners. Cameron, thanks for coming to the show to share your story.
Brian, thanks a lot. Pleasure's all mine. Appreciate the introduction. I can't help but chuckle every time I hear that. Obviously a little bit of guilt and just a funny stroll down memory lane, for lack of a better term. So.
First of all, what's the film? What was going on in your life? I used to work in LA, and I kind of know the struggle of the actor, that story, that myth, and fill us in on that and everything that came before real estate.
Really quick, grew up in a small town in southwest Colorado called Pagosa Springs, beautiful mountain town, an amazing place to grow up. Played a lot of sports growing up, and really, what I think one of the biggest factors that got me into that made me make this really dumb, naive decision to move to Hollywood when I was 18 was the fact that I always felt like I wanted to inspire people growing up. And I didn't know if it was going to be a motivational speaker or, I didn't really understand the idea of a life coach but I felt like that was one of my strengths and I really wanted to do it. Right. And I wasn't religious, so it wouldn't be like a priest but I felt like speaking to large amounts of people was always something that I was wanting and destined to do. But anyway, so finishing high school, didn't want to go to college, didn't want to play sports in college, moved out to Hollywood at 18. And I had ended up thinking I was going to do stunts to kind of tap into the acting industry, because that was also something I always wanted to do, but I didn't do it, right? And I had never done it. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll move to Hollywood and start doing stunts, and then I can break into the business after I've studied a bunch of acting. So I ended up getting into the business quicker than I thought. I started taking acting classes, had great opportunity, got picked up by a fairly large agency right off the bat. Had all these amazing opportunities, but parallel to that, I was 18 and I was a wild kid, and I needed to go through, I think, the school of hard knocks. And what I ended up doing was really blowing a lot of opportunities that I don't regret. I was immature, I was wild, and I wasn't ready. And I've never told this on a podcast, but thinking about it now while we're speaking, a part of it too was, I thought that because I had those opportunities now, I would have them again in the future. And that couldn't have been more wrong, right? So a decade of debauchery and crashing and burning as a human being, pushing 30, met my now amazing wife, all of a sudden had motivation to get my act together. Well, 10 years had gone by and I tried to reboot my acting career, and it was a very slow and painful process. And people were like, where have you been? Okay, start adding credits. And it was very slow and tedious. And I was frustrated with the timing of things. I think at that point we had a kid. And so I decided to make a feature film. I was very antsy. I've always kind of had this entrepreneurial kind of mindset of wanting to do stuff on my own, be the boss. And the movie industry, that's hard to do. So I found some a group of guys, a talented director and a great script that was about actually body dysmorphia. It was about steroid abuse. And I felt like it was such a great movie to make. I hadn't seen any feature film out about steroid abuse, which blew my mind. And so I was really inspired by the story. And, so we raised some money and started making this film. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the hard lesson of not necessarily the right partnerships. These are great guys. I love them to death, but we didn't really see eye to eye on what we were doing. And obviously, as you know, that pertains to real estate, or it can.
How did you raise the money and what happened? Because I know that it doesn't sound like you actually made a profit, but fill us in on that part of the investment there.
The writer, kind of threw in a little bit of his money. We all the director, made us feel like we were going to follow his lead, a little bit more experience. But one thing that happened, and if you ever want to make a movie, I do not recommend rushing things, right? So I think I set out to make an award-winning film that we could sell. And I think that, maybe everybody kind of had that in their head, but the reality of it was we weren't really on the same page. And so I think to make a good film, as you know, the script has to be great, because that is the backbone, that is the foundation of the house, right? That is the blueprint of the house. And so you can't take a mediocre rough draft script and make a great film. And ultimately, that's what we tried to do. And so bless his heart, our lead actor, writer, investor at that point, and then we had went and raised some money from an outside investor. We shot half the movie, and then we strategically we're going to have our lead actor put on about 50 pounds. Which he did. So he put on 50 pounds while we took a break, and then we're ready to shoot. And our director that was going to have the rest of the money somehow didn't have it all of a sudden. And so we were scrambling to finish our film. Meanwhile, lead actors literally 55 pounds in 12 months. I'm sorry, 12 weeks. Maybe or maybe not. Were there anabolic steroids involved? I don't know. But he was stuck and we were stuck. And so my wife, girlfriend at the time, was like, hey, you guys are stuck. I'm going to lend you the money as an investment. And so we were all dumb enough to take it. And as diligent and as an amazing and as sharp as my wife is, she was vulnerable because she wanted to help us out. And I was naive thinking we'd make that money back. And we lost it. The film kind of turned out to be kind of a mess. The trailer looked good. Speaking of trailer editing, we got a pretty decent distributor, Gravitas, but it didn't make our money back. And so after that, I then started getting more and more into screenwriting because I loved it. And I basically was dragging my wife through the mud, going, I found my passion. I love screenwriting. I had a producer that was hired me to write a screenplay in China. I had beat out a big writer to get the job, flew to Beijing. And then I had a pilot that is very near and dear to my heart I had some big groups looking at. And so I kept saying, oh man, we're so close. We're so close. We're so close. And that's when basically my wife's like, I can't do this anymore. Not in terms of a marital stance, but going like, you got to start making money. And she started listening to real estate podcasts. And within a couple of months, she's like, okay, this is it. You're done. I just found out that we can start investing in real estate without a lot of money. And you're going to stop that. I just launched a photography business to make ends meet. You're going to stop doing that. And we are going to pull out equity in our house. You're going to start wholesaling and we're going to start investing in real estate. And that was 3.5 years ago. So
it's a great illustration of how, you can really go down this path that you just keep spending money, which really is an investment in your future and a film, whatever you want it to be, but there's just no payoff. And I know our listeners are saying, okay, make sure we know what the movie was. What was the name of the movie?
Anabolic Life.
Anabolic Life. And where can people find it?
If you really want to find it, it's free on Amazon.
This transition then, real estate coming in and becoming the path to actually financial prosperity. How did that happen? And by the way, I got to say, a lot of what you just described about making a film, it reminds me a lot of the development process and actually building a property. And I know you've developed self-storage facilities. There's a lot of similarities there as far as the pieces coming together. But let's go to the actual transition. Like, how did you end up getting into self-storage?
Since we're talking about it, one thing that I have mentioned is the pain, right? And so I was very guilty. What had happened after that, it was 3 or 4 years of starting to realize we weren't getting our money back. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Like I can lose my own money, but I can't lose the person I love the most, right? So it was brutal. And so why I point that out is because when I found out about real estate, it reminded me when I was 18 and I went to Hollywood and I had all these opportunities. It was a massive opportunity that I never saw ever again. And I saw it in real estate. And we started learning about passive income and the idea of leverage. And I knew nothing. I didn't know what a title company was 3.5 years ago, right? It'll be 4 in September. And so I understood it. It made a lot of sense to me to start leveraging money and trying to kind of get this cash on cash return through leveraging your money into real estate. And so my wife and I were all in very quickly. It made sense. We saw the opportunity. I didn't want to be making $100,000 as a photographer, right? I didn't want to be a wedding photographer and a headshot photographer, even though I love photography and I've done it my whole life, but traveling to these weddings. And so when we learned about real estate, we hired a coach right away. We learned the basics, saw what my coach was doing, where he was looking, how he underwrote, pulled equity out of our house and started looking for deals all over the place. And I literally started looking for deals full time. We bought a triplex in Texas. I bought an 11 unit off Craigslist, both off Craigslist in New Mexico. And then my third property 2.5 years ago, I found a bank-owned self-storage facility. And that was my first property. So we now have a portfolio of 10. And we've acquired those over the last 2.5 years. And that's was the transition. And it was literally desperation meets opportunity.
How did your acting career and your Hollywood career help you in that transition to real estate, whether it be talking to lenders, sellers, that type of thing?
I think the only reason it helped me is because of how painful two reasons: how painful the entertainment process was for me personally because of the choices I made, and how delightful the people have been in comparison in real estate.
Explain that.
I have some great people in the industry, friends and people have done well and have had normal lives. But for the most part, I've experienced a lot of bizarre behavior and lifestyles in Hollywood. And I worked with the biggest celebrities. I was a private bartender. I was in the house of literally some of the biggest celebrities in the world. And it's weird. The entertainment's a weird business, and I'm not shaming it. There's great opportunity. I have so much respect for actors and actresses and producers. It's a hard business, but people don't. And again, a lot of it was the choices I made and where I put myself. So it's not like this for everybody necessarily, but I could never go to a party as an actor, meet a successful director that's like, hey, cool. Well, I'm a director. Let's shoot a movie together, right? It doesn't work like that. And in addition to that, I think because there's so much weirdness and so many people so desperate to get into the entertainment business, I think a lot of people are not only in competition, but don't necessarily want to help you out. And I remember the first day I went to a meetup for real estate, and everybody was so generous with being present, with their conversations, with their time, with their genuine interest. And I was blown away. I'll never forget that. It was my first meetup in Pasadena, California. My wife sent me, and I'm like, oh God, what is this going to be like? So judgmental and already full of expectations, and it was amazing. And it's never stopped. And storage has been the same way. I've met the most wonderful, generous, hardworking people that we help each other, we support each other, and it's been amazing. It really has.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com.
What I've really learned by hosting this podcast for the past 7 years is that people are in the real estate business are very generous with their ideas, their time, their conversation. You're not really afraid to share. No one's really been afraid to share anything on this podcast or in personal conversations that I've had with other investors. It's all very collaborative, very open, an exchange of ideas that is positive for both parties. But I did live in LA and I was in the entertainment industry for a while, so I know exactly what you're talking about. But I did see it from the other side, the people behind the scenes who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting and the real work, who are very dedicated, very talented, and very creative, and don't fall into the same category of the people that you witnessed, which was more on the higher level, the people who are more out front and present.
Yeah, you were in the trenches with the people, like you said, that were really making a lot of this stuff happen. And those are dedicated professionals that are good at their craft, that have worked really hard to get there. And it's their career and they take it very seriously. And all the successful actresses and actors I know, same thing. They take their craft very seriously.
So let's get back to self-storage. So you have 10 facilities, and I believe 9 of them you acquired off market. Can you tell us how you accomplished that?
Again, and it really didn't come from my acting. It came from, I think, my dad, I think it's one of our strengths, and that's being the ability to talk to anybody and enjoying it. I love meeting people, right? I love meeting people, and I love talking to people I've never talked to before. And when I started looking for deals 3.5 years ago, I did something very backwards. I didn't overeducate, and I didn't fall into analysis paralysis. I literally learned the basics, hired a coach, which I leveraged everything from my mentorship. I've never not had a coach. I actually have my own coaching program that I launched for self-storage investors just because of how much I've leveraged from my coaches and how valuable that is. And so what I did was I started looking for deals nonstop. And what happened was those deals were my lifeline. They were my opportunity. They were my leverage. And so very quickly, in a very beginning stage of investing, I found good deals. And with those good deals, I was able to do a couple of things. I was able to put them in front of big investors and then leverage a partnership. I was able to put them in front of my coaches to also form a partnership with seasoned investors and coaches, and then also get their input on the deal. And then because of that, I was able to leverage a very abrupt, quick, successful run as an investor. Starting in multifamily storage has been the best thing that ever happened to us. It's changed our life. I retired my wife. I paid her back tenfold and more so, obviously, emotionally. And I haven't stopped. We, for the last 3.5 years, have developed such an acquisition deal funnel that basically every day I have an opportunity on my desk. And I did 3.5 years ago. And what that did is it brought me a lot of excitement always. And that excitement was my momentum. And when people come to me, is like, if you came to me and said, is there a secret, to investing or being successful, I would say the best thing I could come up with is momentum. The more you can create, the faster you can create it. And the more, and again, you can't rush out, and you can't afford to go rush out and buy a bad deal. That's the one thing you can't do. You can never buy a bad deal. But the more you can be excited, the more you can take advantage, the more you could be listening to, your podcast and those days where things click and you're like, you know what, this is really what I want to do. I really want to replace my W-2 income. I really want to replace my wife's, my spouse's. You got to take action. You have to, because you got to strike while the iron's hot. And that momentum is everything. And when you can go find and learn how to source off-market deals, that is the main thing I teach my students. You have the keys to the castle. You can leverage everything else because everybody else can get you a lender. They can get you money. They can get you an appraisal. They can get you whatever you want, but nobody's going to bring you a deal. Nobody.
I want you to take us through your first deal, because you're starting from being an actor to getting into your first deal. How'd you find it? How'd you take it down?
It was equally as stressful as the movie. So we go in, we're looking for a cash on cash return. All the boxes needed to be checked, growth, population, all that. But then I stumbled upon a deal on Craigslist on an island in Texas. And I'm like, honey, check this out. And she's like, we're not buying a freaking beach house on an island. And I know it sounds crazy, but check this out. It's 3 units. Look at the underwriting. And she's like, she was so upset that I was even showing her.
So this was a residential deal, not.
It was a residential. Yeah. It kept penciling out. And I'm like, hey, I know, but I'm doing a lot of research. It's Port Aransas. It got hit by the Hurricane Katrina. It got rebuilt. There's no there's no long-term housing for all the locals. Right. And so I flew out there after lots of battles, lots of fights. And I was so nervous. I was coming from full on PTSD from losing her money. And I was like, we can't mess up again. Like this has to work. It's all our equity, literally like our one shot, at least to us. Right. And so what I did, I put it in front of a big syndicator that I had met in Austin. I tried to wholesale a single family home in Austin, met a bunch of big flippers, happened to be a very nice, successful syndicator, Mike Krieg. I said, hey man, I have this deal in Port A. He's like, oh man, I love Port A. Let me do some research. He's like, I'm in. It looks great. And we were like, oh my God, this 16-year syndicator who's like a veteran, like amazing, what is going to partner with us? We were like, and then after they found out one of the units was permitted, he's like, you know what? I've been doing this long enough. I'm going to pull out. So then we pulled out. We canceled the contract. I go to my meetup and all my friends that I've met were like, dude, are you kidding me? Look at the returns. We're in. And I'm like, oh God. They're like, we're in. One guy's like, dude, I want to partner. So we go back under contract. We're halfway through and then he pulls out. He says he doesn't have enough money. And at that point, we're like, you know what? We've underwrote it. We've analyzed the market. We bought it. 2 weeks before we closed, COVID hit. The world stopped. One of my tenants fell off the wagon, started doing hard drugs in the house. We had an unpermitted unit in a quiet beach town, and I had ambulance and cops showing up at my house saying that you have one of the most notorious drug addicts on the island living in your property. And I literally, for the first time in my life, couldn't sleep. I was waking up with anxiety. I was calling the doctor saying, I don't know what's happening to me. And because COVID hit, my boys were at home and I had to watch them 10 hours a day. And I couldn't even do business. It was crazy. It was the craziest thing I've ever experienced.
Yeah, how'd you get out past that? I mean, it seems like your one shot is basically falling apart there.
We underwrote the deal properly, and we did our due diligence well, and the deal was still working out. I built rapport with the crackhead. Pardon my slang, but with the drug abuser, I built rapport with her. I listened to her story. I had empathy for her. I helped her get on unemployment, and she paid everything we owed her 3.5 months later. I hired a moving van and 2 guys, and I said, you're moving out. And I had them pick her up and her stuff up. We got her out. We got some other renters in, and a year later, we sold the property, made great profit, and never looked back.
Take us into the self-storage, how you were able to acquire 10 self-storage facilities so quickly in less than 3 years.
First one was bank owned. I was cold calling, hovering over a small cash flowing market in southern New Mexico. I called every owner I could, built a list off online. A lady that was a mortgage broker said, "Hey, I'm not selling, but call this bank. They have REO properties." I didn't know what that was. I Googled it, called them, and they're like, "We don't have anything, but actually we have a piece of land in a storage facility." And I called my partner. I'm like, "Hey, guess what I found?" He's like, "Buy it." I was already interested. He had one before. We bought this bank-owned facility for $6 a square foot 2.5 years ago. It's, now worth millions of dollars. We've expanded on it twice. It was 50% occupied. I, right then and there, under contract, hired my friend and partner now, AJ Osborne, who a lot of the self-storage industry knows. He's been my mentor for 2.5 years, taught me a lot of what I know. And then I kept doing what I've been doing. I kept finding deals. And every time I'd find a good deal that penciled out, I was able to get the money right away. And a lot of times it was my wife. We started a wholesale company. We 1031 to our 11 unit. It was like pulling rabbits out of hats for the last 2.5 years, like coming up with the money. My partner would always be like, "Yeah, let's just buy it ourselves." And it's like, yeah, easy for you to say, but we don't have the money. But we somehow came up with it. And again, moral of the story, we kept finding great deals. And so, I tell everybody and people listening and all my students, I say, if I can get you to find good deals, everything else will follow.
Did I hear you right that you bought your first storage facility at $6 a square foot?
Yeah, 5 acres, 50,000 square foot of warehouse.
It was an REO with the lender. I mean, I didn't even know those existed over the past 5 to 10 years.
Crazy. I know. It's, it's one of those things. I was literally calling a city for 2 months looking for multifamily and just kept diving deeper. The lady that told me about this, I was driving on Google Maps looking for other apartment buildings on Google Maps, saw a satellite image saying for rent by owner. And I called her, and that's who through the daisy chain of crazy kind of, treasure hunting, I found the deal.
Is that your focus now, self-storage? I mean, what's the future for you? Because you've put a lot together. We're in a different economy now. So what does that mean to you? How does that affect the choices you make from here?
We're still buying a lot. We had a single family home company just to make, monthly revenue that came to a screeching halt. I just hired a guy at 6 figures right before basically everything, the market stopped, pivoted him into our acquisitions team on storage. Like they always say, you won't really want to pay extra for a good guy. And he's amazing, Michael. And so our deal acquisition funnel, back to what I said, is so strong right now. We're buying, we're wholesaling storage. I'm teaching people how to do storage. So my focus is all storage right now. Eventually down the road, we'd love to diversify, go back into some multifamily. I still own a couple fourplexes that I found in that same market when I was doing that cold calling. But yeah, we're all in. We're looking at ground up. We're looking at some conversions. We love buying value add, trying to do, 50,000 square feet and over. We have capital partners that have watched us grow. They're like, "Man, we want in." I don't know where you're finding these deals, but they've actually been able to see what we've made and the progress we've made. And so now we have capital partners that are our partners. And so we don't need to syndicate. We just got to keep doing what we're doing. And so we're full force. Just hired an operational manager yesterday, have a team of about 10 employees, want to try and acquire, anywhere from 100 to 200 million in storage in the next, 24 months, something like that. We're not, we're risk adverse. We're not going crazy. We're not buying 4 or 5 caps unless they're 40% at market in an amazing market. We just, again, our whole premise is finding a great deal and making your money going in.
Cameron, what's your favorite hack or app?
I'm not a big app guy. I wish I had a better answer for you. I would say I've found really good VAs that have completely changed my whole game. Like put in the legwork to find good VAs. Mine are all in the Philippines, and trust that if you put enough time into it and find the right person, they can really take your business to the next level. And my full-time assistant, and a couple of my VAs are like running circles around anybody I work with, and they're amazing. And I treat them well. I pay them very well. I incentivize them. And I feel like at this point, they're like almost part of my family. And I would say that's probably my biggest hack.
What do you have them doing for you?
My assistant happens to be a very talented graphic designer. So she's more on my coaching program side. She's helping me with all social media, graphic design, email signatures, stuff like that. But my Excel sheets, I can't even tell you how well they work and what she did to them. I have no idea. And then my other VA that's really, really invaluable for us trains other VAs for us. And she looks for deals. She follows up with owners, keeps us on our toes and making sure we don't miss a deal.
How would people find out more about you and or get a hold of you?
I'm starting to use a lot more in social media. I use Instagram the most. It's just Storage Life Cam. My company is storagelife.com. And so you can find me on Instagram. And if anybody has any questions or you're looking to get into self-storage, or if there's anything I can help you with, shoot me a DM and I'd be happy to connect. And I love helping people out. I really do. Like, as you know, Brian, it's like, if you learn some tricks and they work and you're very grateful for them, well, it's time to start helping other people. So,
Cameron, I've really appreciated you coming on the show and sharing your story with us, especially the pain, because it's a painful story that you shared about investing a lot of your time, your talents, your efforts and money into that film. I'm glad it's worked out for you with real estate. And thank you for sharing with us how you were able to accomplish that. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
You too, Brian. Thanks for having me and thanks for listening.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's HIGinvestor.com.